Let me set the scene for you. Several weeks ago, the House Republicans subpoenaed Hunter Biden. He showed up, he held a press conference, and then he left. He never actually went inside to answer their questions. So today, the House Republicans decided to vote on holding Hunter Biden in contempt of Congress. So he showed up to the vote. And it descended into chaos. The chaos started very early on. Jamie Raskin, the Democrat, began speaking. Marjorie Taylor Greene interrupted him. James Comer lost control very quickly. And then he called on Nancy Mace of South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Comer. First of all, my first question is, who brought Hunter Biden to be here today? That's my first question. Second question, you are the epitome of white privilege, coming into the Oversight Committee, spitting in our face, ignoring a congressional subpoena to be deposed. What are you afraid of? You have no balls to come up here and...
Mr. Chairman, point of inquiry.
Mr. Chairman,
the ladies recognize.
And are women allowed to speak? Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene had already, but the whole thing was just a little bit silly. And that's the point. Afterwards, Hunter Biden went into the hallway. His team wanted to release a statement. I don't know what reporter this is. Listen to this exchange.
Would you please, I'll answer your question if you be quiet and let me make a statement, okay?
What kind of crack do you normally smoke, Mr. Biden?
What kind of crack do you normally smoke, Mr. Biden? All right. This plays to you, don't you? This was great. This was great television, right? This is great. This is the problem, though, is those of us on the right, we love Nancy Mace going after Biden like this, but those on the left love that Hunter Biden showed up at the committee, and then a Democratic member says, we can hear from him right now if you want, and the Republicans refuse to hear from him. So both sides get their pound of flesh for their fundraising emails headed into an election season, and nothing's actually accomplished other than the rest of the world looks on and says, dear God, what is going on in the United States? There's a larger point here. I want to play for you some audio. This is from my buddy Chip Roy, congressman from Texas.
Yeah, Neil, it's a real problem. And we've been saying this for 3 or 4 years during the Biden tenure. And now at least there's a lot of eyes on this. And look, Tom Homan, he's a great American, the former head of ICE under President Trump, good friend of mine. Mark Morgan, former head of Border Patrol. And the folks down there, they're doing their best with a tough situation. But Alejandro Mayorkas doesn't care. I mean, he's blaming it on Texas. He's going to the Supreme Court. They're challenging the governor, cutting razor wire. They want to now challenge our law that allows Texas to try to defend ourselves. 85%. Let's put that in context. 300,000 apprehensions in December. Do the math, right? We're talking about 250,000 releases in December. That's not counting the 50,000 or so rough gotaways that we would estimate we're getting on a monthly basis, which are the worst of the worst, by the way. And that is a major drain on our state and Texas, $12.5 billion we've had to spend out of our own money to do what the federal government is supposed to do. And it's long past due for us to do something about it. It's why I don't think we should be funding the government without getting change. I sure don't think we ought to be giving more money to Ukraine without forcing the change at the border we need to. It's the only tool we have, Neil. I mean, I'm not trying to rattle about shutdown for the sake of it, but the people I represent, they're like, good Lord, shut down the border or shut down the government until you wake up President Biden and Mayorkas to do their job.
What's actually more important to you guys? Getting a pound of flesh from Hunter Biden or securing the border? This is kind of the problem that we are dealing with as a society. We have serious people like Congressman Roy who are focused on the border, and you got Nancy Mace lecturing Hunter Biden and the Democrats yelling in the House Oversight Committee. They're impeaching, want to impeach Mayorkas. They should. They're impeaching Joe Biden. They want to target Hunter Biden. They're dragging the Bidens out, and it plays well to the base. I do not doubt every single one of you are kind of cheering that on. But what about the border issue? We're distracting from that. We're distracting. You can only advance so many messages in a media hostile to you. And the media today, they're eating up the Hunter Biden story. It's all over CNN and MSNBC. They're cheering on Hunter Biden for being brave and bold and pointing out the Republicans when given the opportunity by Democrats to question Hunter Biden, decided not to question him. So he got up and left. The Republican side of things, like, oh, Hunter Biden, he fled the committee. They weren't asking questions. He wasn't there to answer questions. He provided them the opportunity, and they didn't. Meanwhile, we've actually got this fiscal situation shaping up, a $1.7 trillion plan for spending for the next year, and we may have a government shutdown coming up, and this is ultimately the problem for conservatives. I don't like the deal that is being proposed by Speaker Johnson, but I suspect it's the best he could do. And herein lies the rub for the conservatives in the House of Representatives. Half of them are distracted by going after the Biden family, and they're not even paying attention to the bigger issue of the fiscal mess and the border. These people aren't smart enough to multitask. Then you do have the smart guys like Chip Roy, and he's trying to multitask on the important issues of how do we help Israel deal with Ukraine, deal with the border, solve the budget crisis. We have a fiscal cliff that's coming. Trying to get everybody on the same page is impossible. And so this is the problem as we head towards a potential shutdown. And in fact, you've got this situation with the Republicans who think they may want to oust Speaker Johnson because they're not happy with the deal he got. It's the best deal he could get. You get rid of him, you suddenly have a 2-seat majority with Democrats. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but 45 members of the House of Representatives have already declared they're not running again. About half of them are Republicans, including Greg Pence. That's Mike Pence's brother. A lot of others, Drew Ferguson in Georgia, Greg Pence, a number of others, they're not running again. You know what happens when congressmen don't run again? They don't fear the constituents anymore. This is how Obamacare passed. Obamacare passed with Democratic members of Congress who were no longer scared of their constituents, and so they could push it forward because they knew they weren't coming back. They didn't care about losing an election. They weren't running again. So you have a 3-seat majority right now. If you don't take the deal, you're probably going to have a bunch of Republican moderates cut a really bad deal with Democrats, which is far worse than the deal that we've got. So do you want a bad deal or a worse deal is essentially it. And if you want to say, well, we'll just shut down the government, you watch these Republicans who aren't running again, they're going to side with the Democrats. You got these people, they're fed up. They actually want to do something, whether you or I like what they want to do. They think they're there to do something. They can't get anything done. They don't like the showboats like Nancy Mace and Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Those three play to the base. You write them checks and fund them, and the rest of them are like they don't get anything done. They're a clown show. You and I don't want Washington to do anything, but most of the people who are there do. So the question is, how do you navigate this? How do you thread this? You can put the clowns in the clown conference committee and they can yell at each other with the clown Democrats all day about Hunter Biden and actually get nothing done, and everybody else has to get work done. How do you get that done? How do you get that work done? Well, right now is you got to be somewhat realistic. I would say, yes, shut down the government until Joe Biden secures the border. But I know what's going to happen with the 3-seat majority. Those Republicans who aren't running for office again are going to cut a really bad deal with the Democrats and stick it to the conservatives they hate. These people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Nancy Mason and Lauren Boebert and the others, and Matt Gaetz, they've burned bridges with a number of moderate Republicans who, keep in mind, were willing to do a huge cut to government under Kevin McCarthy. They agreed to a massive cut in government under Kevin McCarthy. That was the outline of their beginning negotiations. They agreed to this. And then Matt Gaetz sabotaged it all by getting rid of the speaker. And now those moderates don't think the conservatives are serious, that they just want to be clowns and showboat for grift and send out fundraising letters saying, hey, I ousted the speaker, send me money. They're going to start cutting deals with Democrats that you and I will really hate. The Republicans' problem is easily summed up as this. A number of them do not care whether they are in the majority or the minority. They can still fundraise off the base for their own personal advancement. They don't really want to get anything done other than get exposure. When you take Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Ilana Presley, the rest of them, they actually want to be in the majority to be able to advance their agenda. The only agenda some of these conservatives have in the House, so they're not really even conservatives, they're populists. I mean, look at Marjorie Taylor Greene was willing to back Kevin McCarthy, an absolutely unprincipled politician, and is critical of Mike Johnson, who is unquestionably a conservative, because he can't do any better than Kevin McCarthy. She was willing to allow Kevin McCarthy with no principles to do exactly as Mike Johnson's doing, and she gave McCarthy a pass, but she won't give Johnson a pass for the same thing because he's a conservative. He's being penalized for having principles and not being able to get everything. So what do you want? Do you want a bad deal or a worse deal? Because you're going to get one of the deals. You're going to get one of the deals. You're going to get the bad deal or you're going to get the worst deal. And if you say, well, shut it all down, yes, shut it all down, but I'll tell you what's going to happen. The House moderate Republicans who are not running for re-election again will cut a deal with the House Democrats and you'll get the worst deal. While everybody's distracted by the Hunter Biden nonsense in the House Oversight Committee, which, by the way, you do hold him in contempt, you're relying on Merrick Garland to prosecute him. Good luck with that. Here's my ultimate problem about what's going on with the Republicans in Washington. They're expending a lot of resources in stuff that doesn't really matter. They should impeach Secretary Mayorkas, because while the Senate will not find him guilty, the exploration of what's going on at the Department of Homeland Security will be worth it, and it will force Senate Democrats in a tight reelection campaign, as the border becomes the biggest issue, to take a stand on Mayorkas or not. They should absolutely do that. It forces a political issue. Frankly, nobody except the base of the Republican Party cares about Joe Biden's impeachment or Hunter Biden at this point, because everybody sees it as a tit for tat. And you impeach Joe Biden, well, it's not going to do you any good. The Democrats will circle the wagon around him, just like Republicans circle the wagon around Trump. And it's not going to matter to most people. It matters greatly to you, I know. But to the independent voters that you need in the general election, they just look at both parties as squabbling. Yes, I think the Hunter Biden stuff, there needs to be an appropriate investigation, but the clown show that we are being witnesses, it's the American people are going to tune that out. And meanwhile, you've got a border crisis, you've got foreign policy crisis, you've got the Secretary of Defense AWOL, you've got all of these other issues that actually do resonate with the American public that do not look like a tit for tat. And the problem is, so many of these Republican members of Congress, they're focusing on the issues they can fundraise off of. They're not focusing on the issues that actually lure independent voters to our side for the general election. And they need to recalibrate that, but there's no incentive structure for the GOP to do that when it doesn't matter whether the majority or the minority, they can still fundraise off these things. I guarantee you by the end of the day, Nancy Mace's campaign will have out an email saying she told Hunter Biden to his face he had no balls, send me a check. Meanwhile, the border still needs to be fixed, and we still got to deal with the debt, and we still got to deal with the spending resolution. And the only guy who's come up with a plan is Mike Johnson, and it's not a great plan, but it is the best plan he can get passed through the Senate to get something done. It still gives some cuts, including a clawback of the IRS appropriations to hire more agents. It's not enough. But what can you do when you got a bunch of moderates who are ready to side with the Democrats and give you an even worse deal? It's time for the Republicans in Washington to try to figure out what they actually want to get done that they can get done, instead of just fundraising off of a clown show.